the bullet that grazed Victoria Turner's shoulder in the dusty streets of Manassas, Colorado, in the summer of 1878, wasn't half as painful as the memory of the man who had put her there, and she swore as she pressed her hand against the wound that no man would ever get close enough to hurt her again. She stumbled into the general store, blood seeping through her fingers, her vision blurring at the edges. The proprietor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, gasped and rushed forward, but Victoria waved her off with her good hand. "Just need supplies," Victoria said through gritted teeth. "Bandages, whiskey, needle, and thread." "Child, you need a doctor," Mrs. Henderson protested, her weathered face creased with concern. "No doctors." Victoria's voice was firm despite the tremor running through her body. "No one needs to know about this, Mrs." Henderson hesitated, then nodded slowly. She gathered the requested items and added some clean cloth to the pile. "At least let me help you to the back room." Victoria wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain the wall she had built around herself over the past 2 years, but the blood loss was making her dizzy. She allowed the older woman to guide her behind the curtain that separated the store from the living quarters. As Mrs. Henderson helped her into a chair, the bell above the shop door chimed. "I will be right back," the older woman said, squeezing Victoria's good shoulder gently before disappearing through the curtain. Victoria could hear the low rumble of a male voice, though she couldn't make out the words. She tensed, her hand instinctively moving to the small pistol she kept tucked in her boot. After what James had done, after the lies and the betrayal that had nearly cost her everything, she trusted her gun more than she trusted any human being. The curtain parted and Mrs. Henderson returned, followed by a tall man in dusty trail clothes. Victoria's hand tightened on her pistol, but Mrs. Henderson spoke quickly. "This is Vincent Xavier. He is a ranch hand from the Double R spread outside town. He has experience with bullet wounds, more than I do." "I don't need his help," Victoria said, her voice sharp. Vincent Xavier stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, making no move to come closer. He had sun-weathered skin, dark hair that touched his collar, and eyes the color of storm clouds. There was something quiet about him, something that didn't push or demand. "Madam, I respect that," he said, his voice low and steady. "But that wound needs proper tending, and from the looks of it, you are losing blood fast. I can help or I can leave. Your choice." Victoria studied him through narrowed eyes. She had been good at reading men once, before James had taught her how wrong she could be. This cowboy stood relaxed but not casual, respectful but not servile. There was no calculation in his eyes, no hidden agenda that she could detect. But she had been wrong before. "Fine," she said finally, because the pain was getting worse and she knew infection was a real danger. "But you stay where I can see your hands." Vincent nodded and approached slowly, setting his hat on a nearby table. He washed his hands in the basin Mrs. Henderson provided, then knelt beside Victoria's chair. "I am going to need to cut away your sleeve," he said, waiting for her permission. Victoria nodded curtly. As he worked, his movements were gentle and efficient. He cleaned the wound with whiskey, and Victoria bit down hard on the leather strap Mrs. Henderson offered to keep from crying out. "Bullet went clean through," Vincent said, his voice calm and factual. "That is good. Just needs cleaning and stitching." As he worked, Victoria found herself studying his face. He had small scars, the kind men accumulated from hard work and harder living. His hands were calloused but steady, and he never once let his eyes wander anywhere inappropriate. When she flinched at a particularly painful moment, he paused. "I know it hurts," he said quietly, "just a few more stitches." "I have had worse," Victoria said, though her voice was tight with pain. "I do not doubt it." Vincent tied off the last stitch and began bandaging her shoulder, but that does not make this hurt any less. Something about his words, about the simple acknowledgement without judgment or false sympathy, cracked something small in the wall around Victoria's heart. She pushed the feeling away immediately. When he was finished, Vincent stood and stepped back, giving her space. Keep it clean, change the bandage twice a day. If you see red streaks or it starts to smell bad, you need a doctor whether you want one or not. Thank you, Victoria said stiffly. What do I owe you? Nothing. Vincent picked up his hat. Just take care of yourself, madam. He turned to leave, but Mrs. Henderson stopped him. Vincent, where are your manners? At least tell the lady your name properly. She knows my name, Vincent said, a slight smile touching his lips. And she has had enough of strangers for one day, I would wager. After he left, Mrs. Henderson helped Victoria to a small room above the store. You can stay here tonight, the older woman said. No arguments. You are in no condition to go anywhere else. Victoria was too tired to protest. She lay on the narrow bed, her shoulder throbbing, and wondered how her life had come to this. 2 years ago, she had been the daughter of a prosperous merchant in Denver, engaged to James Caldwell, a charming banker who had swept her off her feet with pretty words and prettier promises. Then she had discovered the truth. James was not a banker but a con man who had used her father's trust to embezzle thousands of dollars. When her father confronted him, James had disappeared, leaving behind nothing but debts and scandal. Her father's heart had given out within 6 months, and Victoria had been left with nothing but a tarnished name and the determination never to be fooled again. She had come to Manassas to start over, taking work as a seamstress and keeping to herself. The bullet wound had come from a stagecoach robbery that morning. She had been one of the passengers, and when the outlaws had started getting rough with an elderly woman, Victoria had pulled her pistol. She had winged one of them before another had returned fire, grazing her shoulder. The outlaws had fled when they heard a posse approaching, and Victoria had slipped away before anyone could ask too many questions. She closed her eyes, but sleep would not come. Instead, she kept seeing Vincent Xavier's steady gray eyes, the way he had waited for her permission before helping, the way he had given her space when it was done. It made her uncomfortable, that small kindness. It reminded her of feelings she had buried deep. The next morning, Victoria woke to find fresh bread and butter on a tray beside her bed, along with a cup of tea that had gone cold. Her shoulder ached, but the bleeding had stopped. She dressed carefully, fashioning a sling from a shawl Mrs. Henderson had left, and made her way downstairs. You should rest another day, Mrs. Henderson said when she saw Victoria preparing to leave. I have work, Victoria replied. Mrs. Garrett is expecting 3 dresses finished by the end of the week. Victoria, child, you have been shot, and the stitches are holding fine. Victoria softened her tone slightly. Thank you for your kindness, Mrs. Henderson, truly, but I cannot afford to lose the work. She left the store and made her way to the small room she rented above the milliner's shop. The town was coming alive around her. Miners heading to the hills, ranchers bringing goods to market, women beginning their daily errands. Manassas was not a large town, but it was growing, situated as it was along a route that served both the mining camps and the cattle ranches spreading across the Colorado Territory. Victoria spent the day sewing, though her shoulder protested every movement. She had nearly finished the first dress when a knock came at her door. Instinctively, her hand moved toward her pistol before she called out, "Who is it?" "Vincent Xavier, madam. Mrs. Henderson asked me to check on your wound." Victoria hesitated, then opened the door a crack. Vincent stood in the hallway holding his hat again, looking uncomfortable. "I really am fine," she said. Then it will take just a moment to verify that, he replied. Mrs. Henderson was quite insistent. Despite herself, Victoria felt a small smile tug at her lips. Mrs. Henderson was indeed a force to be reckoned with. She opened the door wider and gestured for him to enter, though she left it open for propriety's sake. Vincent examined her bandage with the same efficient gentleness he had shown the day before. "Healing clean," he said. "You have been keeping it dry." "Yes." "Good." He rewrapped the bandage with fresh cloth he had brought. "You should still take it easy for a few days." "I will take that under consideration," Victoria said dryly. Vincent studied her for a moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he saw more than she wanted to show. "Why did you have a gun on that stagecoach?" he asked quietly. Victoria stiffened. "How did you know I was on the stagecoach? Small town. News travels." "The other passengers mentioned a brave woman who shot at the outlaws." He paused. "They also mentioned she slipped away before the sheriff could talk to her." "I do not like sheriffs," Victoria said flatly. "Fair enough. Plenty of folks feel that way." Vincent picked up his hat. "Your secret is safe with me, Miss Turner." "Mrs. Turner," Victoria corrected automatically, then cursed herself. She had been using the false title since arriving in Manassas, finding that people left widows alone more readily than unmarried women. Something flickered in Vincent's eyes, but he just nodded. "Mrs. Turner, then, I will check on you again tomorrow if that is acceptable." "That is not necessary. Humor me." He settled his hat on his head. "I would hate for all that good stitching to go to waste." Over the next week, Vincent came by each day to check her wound. Victoria told herself she allowed it only because refusing would draw more attention, but the truth was more complicated. Despite her determination to keep everyone at arm's length, she found herself looking forward to his visits. Vincent never stayed long and never pushed for personal information. Instead, he talked about simple things as he worked: the weather, the horses on the ranch, a hawk he had seen circling over the valley. His voice was soothing in a way Victoria had not realized she missed, a human connection without demands or expectations. One evening, as he was finishing rewrapping her bandage, Victoria found herself asking, "Why do you do this?" Vincent looked up, genuinely puzzled. "Do what?" "Come here every day, help me. You don't know me." "Do I need a reason beyond common decency?" he asked. "In my experience, yes. People always want something." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry someone taught you that," he said finally. "But I don't want anything from you, Mrs. Turner. Sometimes help is just help." Victoria felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. She looked away, blinking hard. "The wound is healed enough. You do not need to keep coming." "All right." Vincent stood, no argument, no protest. "But if you need anything, I am staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street. Mrs. Patterson's place." After he left, Victoria sat in the gathering darkness and wondered why his easy acceptance of her dismissal made her feel hollow inside. 2 weeks passed. Victoria finished Mrs. Garrett's dresses and took on more work. Her shoulder healed well, leaving only a small scar. She saw Vincent occasionally around town, and he always tipped his hat politely but never approached. She told herself she was glad. Then came the night of the town dance. Victoria had no intention of going, but Mrs. Henderson had been so insistent that she finally agreed, if only to stop the older woman's matchmaking attempts. She wore one of her own creations, a deep blue dress with modest trim, and pinned her dark hair up carefully. The dance was held in the largest barn on the outskirts of town, and it seemed like half of Manassas had turned out. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light over the crowd. A small band played fiddle music, and couples swung across the makeshift dance floor. Victoria found a seat along the wall, content to watch. Several men asked her to dance, but she politely declined each one. Then Vincent Xavier appeared in front of her, offering his hand. "One dance," he said, "just as friends." Victoria looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and scarred from years of ranch work. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain the safe distance she had established. But something about the honest hope in his eyes made her place her hand in his. The fiddle music was lively, and Vincent was a surprisingly good dancer. He held her properly, never too close, and guided her through the steps with easy confidence. Despite herself, Victoria felt some of the tension she carried constantly begin to ease. "You dance well," she said as they moved across the floor. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," Vincent replied. "Said a man who could not dance was only half civilized. How many brothers do you have?" "3, all back in Texas. I am the youngest." "What brought you to Colorado?" The question surprised her even as she asked it. She had made a point of not asking personal questions, of not getting involved. "Needed a fresh start," Vincent said simply. "Sometimes a man has to leave the past behind to find his future." Something in his words resonated deep in Victoria's chest. Before she could respond, the music ended. Vincent released her immediately and stepped back. "Thank you for the dance, Mrs. Turner." "Victoria," she said impulsively. "You can call me Victoria." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it from merely pleasant to genuinely handsome. "Victoria, then, and I am Vincent, not that formal nonsense." They stood there for a moment, the crowd moving around them, neither quite ready to walk away. Then someone called Vincent's name and the moment broke. "I should go," he said, "but I am glad you came tonight." "Me too," Victoria admitted quietly. As Vincent disappeared into the crowd, Victoria felt something shift inside her. It was small, barely noticeable, like the first crack in winter ice, and it terrified her. She left the dance soon after and walked home through the quiet streets. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of pine from the mountains. Victoria had almost reached her building when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, hand moving to her pistol, but it was only Vincent. "Forgive me," he said, raising his hands peacefully. "I saw you leaving alone and thought I should make sure you got home safely." "I can take care of myself," Victoria said, but without the sharp edge her words usually carried. "I know you can." Vincent fell into step beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "But that does not mean you should have to. Not always." They walked in silence until they reached her building. Victoria paused at the door, then turned to face him. In the moonlight, his features were softer, and there was something in his expression that made her chest ache. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked, and this time the question came out more vulnerable than she intended. "Why do you keep showing up?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "Because you look like someone who has forgotten what kindness without conditions feels like," he said finally. "And I think you deserve to remember." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. "You do not know anything about me." "No, I do not," Vincent agreed, "but I would like to if you would let me." Everything in Victoria screamed at her to say no, to protect herself, to maintain the walls that had kept her safe for 2 years. But standing there in the moonlight, looking into Vincent's honest gray eyes, she found herself saying, "I am not looking for romance." "That is all right," Vincent said. "I am just offering friendship. Whatever else might come, if anything, will come in its own time." "I was engaged once," Victoria heard herself say. "He betrayed me, used me, nearly destroyed my family." "I am not him," Vincent said simply. "How do I know that?" "You do not yet." Vincent settled his hat more firmly on his head. "But I am willing to prove it for as long as it takes. No pressure, no expectations, just showing up if you will let me." Victoria wrapped her arms around herself, feeling exposed and raw. Why would you do that? Vincent smiled, soft and sad. Because I think you are worth waiting for, Victoria Turner, and I have got nothing but time. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Victoria standing alone in the moonlight with her heart pounding and her carefully constructed defenses trembling. The next morning, Victoria found a small bouquet of wildflowers on her doorstep with no note. She knew who they were from. She put them in water and set them on her windowsill, where the morning sun made them glow. Vincent did not push. Over the following weeks, he simply existed in Victoria's orbit, a steady presence without demands. He helped Mrs. Henderson carry supplies when Victoria was shopping there. He offered a friendly greeting when they passed on the street. He brought fresh flowers every few days, always wildflowers from the hills, never roses or anything that spoke of romance. Slowly, carefully, Victoria began to unbend. She found herself lingering when they happened to meet, exchanging more than just pleasantries. She learned that Vincent had been a ranger in Texas before coming to Colorado, that he had left after his best friend died in an ambush. Vincent blamed himself for not preventing. She learned that he was 26, 3 years older than her, and that he sent money home to his mother every month. In turn, she told him small things about herself. Her love of sewing, which had started as a necessity but had become a genuine pleasure. Her childhood in Denver, skating on frozen ponds in winter and picking berries in summer. Small, safe pieces of her past that did not include James or heartbreak. One Saturday afternoon in early autumn, Victoria was shopping for thread when she overheard 2 women talking in harsh whispers. "I heard she is not even really a widow," one said, "just pretending to avoid questions." "Well, what kind of woman travels alone and carries a gun?" the other replied. "It is not natural, and the way that Cowboy follows her around." Victoria felt her face flush hot with anger and shame. She abandoned her shopping and hurried out of the store, nearly colliding with Vincent on the sidewalk. "Victoria, what is wrong?" he asked immediately, reaching out to steady her, then dropping his hands when she flinched. "Nothing," she said tightly. "Everything. I should leave this town." "What happened?" Victoria shook her head, unable to speak around the tightness in her throat. Vincent gently guided her away from the store down a side street where they had more privacy. He did not push, just waited until she was ready to talk. "They know I am not a widow," she finally said, her voice shaking. "They think I am lying. They are talking about me, about us, making assumptions." "Let them talk," Vincent said calmly. "You do not understand. In Denver, after James, people talked. They said I must have known what he was doing, that I was probably helping him. The scandal killed my father as surely as any bullet." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "What is James's full name?" "What? Why? Just curious about the man stupid enough to let you go." Despite everything, Victoria felt a startled laugh escape. "James Caldwell, and he did not let me go. He used me and disappeared when he got caught. Where is he now? I do not know. No one does. He vanished completely." Victoria looked up at Vincent. "Why does it matter?" "It does not, really," Vincent said. "Except that I think you are still carrying shame that is not yours to carry. What he did, that is on him, not you. But I trusted him. I believed his lies. That makes you trusting, not stupid. And it makes him a monster, not you." Vincent's voice was fierce in a way she had never heard before. "You did nothing wrong, Victoria. Nothing." Victoria felt tears spill over, and this time she could not stop them. Vincent pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her, not trying to touch her, just offering comfort in the only way she would accept. "I am sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I am not usually so emotional. You have nothing to apologize for." Vincent leaned against the building beside her. "For what it is worth, I do not care what the gossips say, and anyone worth knowing in this town will not either." You do not care that I lied about being a widow. You did what you needed to do to protect yourself. No judgment here." Victoria looked at him, this quiet cowboy who had somehow slipped past her defenses without her realizing it. "Why are you so understanding?" "Because I know what it is like to carry guilt that is not entirely yours," Vincent said, "and I know how heavy that weight can be." They stood there in comfortable silence as Victoria composed herself. Finally, she said, "Would you like to have dinner with me, tonight? Nothing fancy, just stew and bread at my place." Vincent's face lit up with surprise and pleasure. "I would like that very much." That evening, Vincent arrived at Victoria's door with a bottle of wine and more wildflowers. Victoria had cleaned her small room until it shone and had prepared a simple but hearty meal. They ate at her small table, and conversation flowed easier than Victoria had expected. "Tell me about Texas," she said as they finished eating. "What was it like growing up there?" Vincent's expression turned nostalgic. "Hot mostly, and dusty. We had a small ranch, nothing fancy. My father died when I was 12, so my older brothers and I helped my mother keep it running." He smiled. "She is a formidable woman, tiny but tough. You would like her. And your brothers, all married now with kids. My mother writes that she has 7 grandchildren and is hoping for more." He paused. "She also writes that she is waiting for me to come to my senses and give her grandchildren of my own." Victoria felt her cheeks warm. "That is rather pointed. She is not known for subtlety." Vincent poured more wine into their glasses. "What about you? Any siblings?" "No, it was just me. My mother died when I was young. My father raised me, taught me to read and figure numbers. He used to say I was as smart as any son." Victoria's voice softened. "I miss him every day. He sounds like a good man, he was, and James destroyed him." Victoria looked down at her glass. "That is what I cannot forgive. Not what James did to me, but what he did to my father." Vincent reached across the table and laid his hand palm up, an invitation. Victoria looked at it for a long moment before slowly placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. "It is all right to be angry," Vincent said quietly. "And it is all right to be afraid of trusting again. But Victoria, you cannot let one bad man steal your whole future." "What if I make the same mistake?" she whispered. "What if I trust the wrong person again? What if you do not?" Vincent's thumb stroked gently across her knuckles. "What if you lock yourself away and miss something real because you are too afraid to try?" Victoria met his eyes, saw the warmth there, the patience. "I do not know how to do this," she admitted. "I do not know how to let someone in again." "Then we will figure it out together," Vincent said. "No rushing, no pressure, just taking it one day at a time. And if I need space, if I need to step back sometimes, then you step back. I will still be here when you are ready to step forward again." Victoria felt something loosen in her chest, some tight knot of fear and hurt beginning to unwind. "I am broken," she said. "Damaged." "No," Vincent said firmly. "You are hurt. There is a difference. Broken means cannot be fixed. Hurt means healing is possible." He squeezed her hand gently. "And I am patient." They talked late into the night, and when Vincent finally left, he kissed her hand at the door with old-fashioned courtesy. Victoria watched him walk away and realized with a start that she was smiling. Over the next few months, Victoria and Vincent built something fragile and precious. They took long walks in the evenings when the work was done, Vincent telling her stories about his time as a ranger, Victoria sharing memories of her childhood. They had dinner together several times a week, sometimes at her place, sometimes at the small restaurant in town. Vincent never pushed for more than she was ready to give. When Victoria had bad days, when the memories of James's betrayal came flooding back and she withdrew into herself, Vincent gave her space but let her know he was there when she was ready. He was steady as the mountains that ringed the valley, and slowly, Victoria began to believe he might actually be what he seemed. The first time Vincent tried to kiss her, it was snowing. They had been walking home from the church social, and snowflakes were falling soft and thick around them. Vincent had walked her to her door as always, but this time when she turned to say goodnight, he leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Victoria froze. She wanted the kiss, wanted it desperately, but fear paralyzed her. Vincent stopped immediately, reading the panic in her eyes. "I am sorry," he said, stepping back. "Too soon." "No, Victoria struggled to find words. "I want to, but It is all right." Vincent's voice was gentle, understanding. "There is no hurry." "You must think I am ridiculous," Victoria said, tears pricking her eyes. "Getting so worked up over a simple kiss." "I think you are brave," Vincent said. "I think you have been through something that hurt you deeply, and you are still here, still trying. That is not ridiculous. That is courageous." Victoria looked up at him through the falling snow. "How are you real?" she whispered. Vincent smiled. "I am real, and I am not going anywhere." He tipped his hat and left her there, and Victoria went inside feeling a confusing mix of relief and disappointment. 2 weeks later, they were in Victoria's room. She was mending a tear in Vincent's jacket while he sat at her table, cleaning his pistol. It was a domestic scene, comfortable and easy, and Victoria realized with a start that this was what she had always wanted. Not grand gestures or flowery promises, but simple companionship with someone who made her feel safe. "Vincent," she said suddenly, "ask me again." He looked up from his gun, confused. "Ask you what?" "To kiss me." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He set down the pistol carefully and stood, crossing to where she sat. "Victoria Turner," he said softly, "may I kiss you?" Victoria set aside the mending and stood, her heart pounding. "Yes." Vincent cupped her face gently in his hands, his touch reverent, and kissed her. It was soft and sweet, with none of the demanding passion James had used to overwhelm her defenses. This was different. This was a question and an answer, a promise of patience. When they parted, Victoria found she was crying. Vincent wiped away her tears with his thumbs. "What is wrong?" "Nothing," Victoria said, and meant it. For the first time in 2 years, absolutely nothing is wrong. Vincent smiled and pulled her into his arms, just holding her. Victoria pressed her face against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart, and thought that maybe, just maybe, she could trust again. Winter deepened, and Victoria and Vincent grew closer. They were the subject of much speculation in town, but Victoria found she cared less as time went on. Mrs. Henderson was delighted, calling them her favorite couple. Even some of the women who had gossiped initially softened when they saw how happy Victoria seemed. On Christmas Eve, Vincent took Victoria to see the ranch where he worked. The Double R was a sprawling operation running several hundred head of cattle across the valley. The owner, Mr. Richards, was a gruff but fair man who greeted Victoria with surprising warmth. "So you are the seamstress who has stolen my best ranch hand's attention," he said with a twinkle in his eye. I was beginning to think Vincent here had forgotten women existed. "I assure you he has not," Victoria said, making the old rancher laugh. Vincent showed her around, introducing her to the other hands and the horses he cared for. There was one in particular, a gray mare with intelligent eyes that nuzzled Victoria's hand gently. "She likes you," Vincent said. "Usually she is standoffish with strangers. She is beautiful." Victoria stroked the mare's nose. "What is her name?" "Silver. I have been training her myself." Vincent hesitated, then said, "I was thinking come spring maybe I could teach you to ride if you wanted." "I would like that," Victoria said, meaning it. The thought of spending long afternoons riding through the valley, with Vincent filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the winter sun. They had Christmas dinner at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, along with a dozen other people who had nowhere else to go. It was loud and chaotic and wonderful, and Victoria realized she had found something she thought she had lost forever, a sense of belonging. That night, as Vincent walked her home, he pulled a small package from his coat pocket. "Merry Christmas," he said, looking almost shy. Victoria unwrapped it to find a delicate silver locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of the two of them, taken by the traveling photographer who had passed through town in November. She had not even known Vincent had bought a copy. "Vincent, it is beautiful," she breathed. "I wanted you to have something to remind you," he said, "of how far you have come, how strong you are." Victoria threw her arms around his neck and kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and growing affection into it. When they parted, both were breathing hard. "I am falling in love with you," Victoria said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "And it terrifies me." "I am already in love with you," Vincent replied. "And yes, it is terrifying, but it is also the best thing I have ever felt." They stood there in the cold, holding each other, and Victoria felt the last pieces of her wall crumble away. She was vulnerable now, exposed, but for the first time, that did not feel like weakness. It felt like freedom. Spring came to the valley with a rush of wildflowers and melting snow. True to his word, Vincent began teaching Victoria to ride. Silver proved to be a patient teacher's mount, and Victoria took to riding with surprising ease. They spent long afternoons exploring the hills around Manasseh, and Victoria felt herself healing in ways she had not thought possible. One afternoon in late April, they had ridden further than usual, up into the foothills where the aspens were just beginning to leaf out. They stopped to rest beside a small creek, and Vincent spread out a blanket he had brought. "I have something to tell you," he said as they sat down. He sounded nervous, which was unusual for him. Victoria felt her stomach tighten. "What is it?" "Mr. Richards is retiring. He wants to sell the ranch." Vincent picked up a small stone and tossed it into the creek. "He has offered to sell it to me and a few of the other hands as partners. It is a good opportunity, but it means committing to stay here long term." "That sounds wonderful," Victoria said, relieved it was not bad news. "Why do you sound worried?" Vincent turned to face her fully. "Because I need to know if you could see a future here, with me." "Before I make that commitment," Victoria's heart began to pound. "Vincent, what are you asking?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "I am asking if you will marry me. I know it has not been that long, and if you need more time, I will wait. But I love you, Victoria. I want to build a life with you, here in this valley. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to be the man you can trust with your whole heart." He paused. "But only if that is what you want too." Victoria looked at the ring, then at Vincent's earnest face, and felt a surge of pure panic. Marriage. The word brought back every memory of James, every broken promise and betrayed trust. "I cannot," she said, the words tearing out of her. "I am sorry, Vincent, I just cannot." She saw the hurt flash across his face before he hid it. "It is all right," he said quietly. "I told you I will wait." "What if you are waiting for nothing?" Victoria asked, tears streaming down her face. "What if I can never get past what he did to me?" Vincent took her hands gently. "Then we will figure something else out. But Victoria, I need you to understand something. I am not asking you to marry me because I think it is time or because it is expected. I am asking because I love you and I want to spend my life with you, whatever form that takes." "I do not know what I fear more," Victoria whispered. "Saying yes and having it all fall apart, or saying no and losing you anyway." "You will not lose me," Vincent said firmly. "Not unless you tell me to go." "I meant what I said, Victoria. I will wait. A month, a year, 10 years. However long you need. That is not fair to you, Victoria sobbed. You should find someone who can give you what you want without all this fear and baggage. I do not want someone else, Vincent said. I want you, all of you, including the parts that are still healing. He pulled her into his arms and let her cry, his hand stroking her hair, his voice murmuring soft reassurances. When the storm of tears finally passed, Victoria pulled back and looked at him. Ask me what I fear most, she said. Vincent looked confused but said, What do you fear most? Trusting again, Victoria whispered. After everything with James, after being so wrong about him, I am terrified of making that mistake again, of giving someone that much power over me and having them destroy me. Vincent cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes serious. Then I will wait, he said simply. For as long as it takes for you to trust me, for as long as it takes for you to believe that I am not him, that what we have is real, I will wait, Victoria, because you are worth it. Victoria closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling over. What if I never get there? Then we will have spent however much time we have together being happy, Vincent said, and that will have to be enough. They sat there by the creek as the afternoon sun moved across the sky, holding each other. Finally, Victoria said, I do love you. You know that, right? I know, Vincent said. And that is enough for now. They rode back to town in the golden evening light, and though Victoria's heart was still tangled with fear and doubt, she felt something else too, hope. Over the next few weeks, Victoria wrestled with herself. Vincent had meant what he said about waiting. He never mentioned marriage again, never pushed. But Victoria could see the hope in his eyes every time he looked at her, and it made her feel guilty and grateful in equal measure. She talked to Mrs. Henderson one afternoon while helping sort through new fabric deliveries. That boy loves you something fierce, the older woman said. I have not seen devotion like that in many years. I know, Victoria said. That is what scares me. Mrs. Henderson gave her a shrewd look. You are not still comparing him to that Caldwell fellow, are you? Victoria started. She had never told Mrs. Henderson the full story, but apparently small towns had ways of finding things out. How did you know? I have eyes, child. And I remember when you first came here, looking like a kicked dog. Mrs. Henderson's voice gentled. But Vincent is not James Caldwell. Surely you can see that by now. In my head, yes, Victoria admitted. But my heart is slower to believe. Then what would it take? Mrs. Henderson asked. What would make you believe Vincent is different? Victoria thought about that for a long time. I do not know, she finally said. Maybe just time. Time, Mrs. Henderson said, is something that boy seems willing to give you. That night, unable to sleep, Victoria sat at her window and watched the stars. She thought about Vincent, about the steady way he had shown up day after day, asking nothing, giving everything. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how he had never once tried to control her or make her into something she was not. She thought about James, and realized with a start that she had not thought about him in weeks. The obsessive anger and hurt that had consumed her for so long had faded to a distant ache. Vincent had not erased James from her past, but he had given her a future bright enough that the past no longer dominated everything. Maybe, Victoria thought, that was trust. Not a dramatic declaration or a leap of faith, but a slow accumulation of moments that added up to certainty. The next morning she sought out Vincent at the ranch. He was in the barn, mucking out stalls, and looked surprised to see her. Victoria, what is wrong? Nothing is wrong, she said. I have been thinking. Vincent set down his pitchfork and waited, that patient look in his eyes. You asked me to marry you, Victoria said, and I said I could not. I want to explain why. You do not owe me an explanation, Vincent said gently. I know, but I want to give you one anyway. Victoria took a deep breath. When James betrayed me, it was not just the loss of him that hurt. It was the loss of myself. I had been so certain I knew him, so sure of my judgment. When I learned the truth, it felt like I could not trust my own mind anymore. If I could be that wrong about someone I loved, how could I ever trust myself to be right again? Vincent moved closer but did not touch her. And now I realized that James was a skilled liar. He fooled my father too and a dozen other people. Being deceived by a professional con man does not mean my judgment is broken. Victoria met his eyes. And you have spent months showing me exactly who you are in 100 small ways. You have never been anything but honest and kind and patient. Does this mean? Vincent trailed off, hardly daring to hope. It means I am still scared, Victoria said honestly. But I am tired of letting fear make my decisions. And I am tired of being so cautious that I miss out on happiness. She pulled the ring he had given her from her pocket. She had kept it, carrying it like a talisman. So yes, if the offer is still open, yes, I will marry you. The joy that broke across Vincent's face was like sunrise. He swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with a passion that made her knees weak. "We will do this at your pace," he said when they finally broke apart. "Small wedding, big wedding tomorrow, next year, whatever you want." "Small wedding," Victoria said immediately. "Soon, before I lose my nerve." Vincent laughed and pulled her close again. "You are the bravest woman I have ever met," he said into her hair, "and I am going to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Manassas. Mrs. Henderson stood up with Victoria, and one of Vincent's fellow ranch hands stood up with him. The ceremony was simple and short, but when Victoria spoke her vows, her voice was steady and sure. That night, in the small house Vincent had rented for them, Victoria lay in her husband's arms and felt at peace for the first time in years. Vincent had been patient with her nervousness, gentle and loving, and she had found that trust could grow even in the intimate spaces where James had left the deepest wounds. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked softly, his hand stroking her hair. "That I am happy," Victoria said. "Truly happy. I did not think I would ever feel this way again." Vincent kissed her forehead. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We have got a whole lifetime ahead of us." Over the next year, Victoria and Vincent built their life together. Vincent and his partners bought the Double R Ranch and renamed it the Three Partners Ranch. Victoria continued her sewing work, but also began helping with the ranch books, her head for figures proving invaluable. They had their struggles. There were times when Victoria would wake from nightmares about James and pull away from Vincent, lost in old fears. There were times when Vincent's work kept him away for days at a time, and Victoria would spiral into worry that he would not come back. But they worked through each difficulty together, learning each other's needs and triggers, building trust brick by brick. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. What if she was a bad mother? What if she could not protect this child the way her father had failed to protect her? Vincent held her through the panic attacks and reminded her gently that fear was natural but did not have to be prophetic. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he said. "Look at how much you have already overcome. This baby is lucky to have you." Their son was born in December 1880, right as the first snow began to fall. They named him David, after Victoria's father, and Victoria cried as she held him for the first time, feeling like she was being given a second chance at family. Vincent was a devoted father, walking the floor with David when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, showing the kind of partnership Victoria had not even known to hope for. Watching him with their son, Victoria felt the last shadows of her past finally lift. When David was 6 months old, Victoria was going through some old papers and found a newspaper clipping Mrs. Henderson had saved for her. It was from a Denver paper, reporting that James Caldwell had been arrested in San Francisco for fraud. He had been tried, convicted, and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Victoria stared at the clipping for a long time. 2 years ago, this news would have consumed her. She would have felt vindication and rage and a dozen other complicated emotions. Now, she felt mostly nothing. James was part of her past, a chapter closed. She showed the clipping to Vincent that evening. He read it and then looked at her carefully. "How do you feel?" "Relieved, I suppose," Victoria said. "Not because of any justice being served, but because it feels final. That part of my life is truly over." Vincent pulled her close. "Are you glad you took a chance on me?" Victoria tilted her head up to kiss him. "Every single day," she said. "You gave me back something I thought James had stolen forever. You taught me that trusting again was possible." "You taught yourself that," Vincent said. "I just stood still long enough for you to see I was not going to hurt you." They stood there in the fading light, their son asleep in the next room, and Victoria thought about how different her life was from what she had imagined 3 years ago. She had thought she would live alone forever, armored against hurt. Instead, she had found a man patient enough to wait for her healing, strong enough to stand beside her through the hard parts, and loving enough to make every day feel like a gift. 3 years later, Victoria gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Sarah. The ranch was thriving, and Vincent and his partners had expanded their operation. Victoria had trained 2 other women in town in sewing, creating a small cooperative that supplied goods to stores across the territory. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Victoria back to the creek where he had first proposed. They left the children with Mrs. Henderson, who was now an honorary grandmother and spoiled all 3 shamelessly. "You remember what you said here?" Vincent asked as they sat on the bank. "I said I could not marry you," Victoria replied, "that I was too afraid. And I said I would wait." Vincent took her hand. "I want you to know I would do it all again. Every day of waiting, every moment of patience. It was all worth it to be here now with you." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know, when I was young, I thought love was supposed to be easy, sweeping and romantic and simple. James seemed to fit that idea perfectly, and look how wrong I was." "And now?" Vincent asked. "Now I know that real love is patient. It is showing up day after day. It is wading through fear and doubt. It is choosing each other even when it is hard." She squeezed his hand. "What we have is not easy, but it is real, and it is worth everything." "I love you," Vincent said simply. "I love you too," Victoria replied. "Thank you for waiting for me." "I would wait forever if I had to," Vincent said, "but I am glad I did not have to." They sat there until the sun set, talking about their children, their dreams for the ranch, the life they were building together. And Victoria realized that she had finally, truly, let go of the fear that had controlled her for so long. She trusted Vincent completely, not because he had never given her reason to doubt, but because he had given her 5 years of reasons to believe. Years continued to pass, measured in the growth of their children and the expansion of their ranch. David grew into a serious boy who loved horses as much as his father did. Emma and Sarah were inseparable, wild and joyful in a way that sometimes made Victoria's heart ache with happiness. When Victoria was 31, she gave birth to another son, Michael. At 33, she had another daughter, Rebecca. Each child was a gift, a symbol of the life she had rebuilt from the ashes of her past. Mrs. Henderson passed away peacefully in her sleep when Victoria was 35. The whole town mourned, and Victoria felt the loss deeply. The older woman had been her first real friend in Manasseh, the one who had seen past Victoria's walls to the hurt woman inside. At the funeral, Victoria held Vincent's hand tightly and thought about how many people had helped her become who she was now. Mrs. Henderson, who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. Vincent, who had loved her patiently through her healing. Even James, in a twisted way, had taught her how strong she really was. Life on the ranch was good. The three partners prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the valley. Vincent's partners married and had families of their own, and the ranch became a small community unto itself. Victoria's sewing cooperative grew into a profitable business, employing 12 women and providing goods across southern Colorado. On a warm summer evening in 1890, Victoria sat on the porch of their ranch house and watched her children play in the yard. David was 15 now, already helping run the ranch. The twins were 12, full of energy and mischief. Michael was 7, thoughtful and quiet like his mother. Rebecca was 5, the baby who ruled the household with dimpled smiles. Vincent came out and sat beside her, handing her a cup of coffee. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing each other completely. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not come to Manasseh?" Vincent asked. Victoria considered. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not with regret. Everything I went through led me here to you, to our children. I would not change any of it, even the hard parts." "Not even James, not even James," Victoria said firmly. "He taught me that I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive heartbreak and betrayal and build something beautiful on the other side." She looked at Vincent. "And he taught me to recognize real love when I finally found it." Vincent smiled and kissed her temple. "You know, when I first saw you in Mrs. Henderson's store, bleeding and defiant, I thought you were the most magnificent thing I had ever seen." "I was a mess," Victoria protested. "You were surviving," Vincent corrected. "And I think that is when I started falling in love with you, before I even knew your name." "Well, I thought you were meddling," Victoria said with a laugh. "I definitely did not want your help." "But you let me help anyway," Vincent said. "And that took courage too. Letting someone in after being hurt like that." They watched as David helped Rebecca climb into the wagon, the twins racing around them in some game only they understood. Michael sat on the fence, reading a book in the fading light. "We made good kids," Vincent said softly. "We made a good life," Victoria replied. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Victoria thought about the scared, hurt woman she had been 12 years ago. That woman had believed she would never trust again, never love again, never be whole again. But here she was, surrounded by love and laughter and the simple joy of a life well lived. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked, echoing the question he had asked her on their wedding night. "That you were right," Victoria said. "About waiting, about me being worth it, about all of it." "I am always right," Vincent said with mock seriousness, then laughed when Victoria elbowed him. "But seriously, I am the lucky one. You took a chance on a dusty cowboy with more patience than sense." "The best decision I ever made," Victoria said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The children came running up then, Rebecca demanding a story before bed, Michael wanting help with a difficult passage in his book, the twins arguing about something that seemed vitally important to them. Victoria and Vincent gathered their family inside, and the evening dissolved into the beautiful chaos of bedtime routines and goodnight kisses. Later, lying in bed with Vincent's arms around her, Victoria thought about trust. It was not, she had learned, a single decision or a leap of faith. It was a practice, a daily choice to believe in someone, to let them close despite the risk. And Vincent had made that choice easy by showing up consistently, by being exactly who he said he was, day after day, year after year. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Vincent murmured, already half asleep. "Always have, always will." Victoria smiled and closed her eyes, safe in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring another day of this life they had built together. Another day of love and trust, and the kind of happiness she had once thought impossible. The years continued to unfold with their share of joys and sorrows. They lost cattle to harsh winters and gained them back in productive springs. David eventually married a schoolteacher from Denver and brought her to work the ranch. The twins grew into beautiful young women, Emma marrying a banker in town and Sarah shocking everyone by becoming a doctor, one of the first women in Colorado to do so. Michael became a lawyer, moving to Denver but visiting often. Rebecca, their baby, fell in love with one of Vincent's partner's sons and married him in a beautiful ceremony on the ranch when she was 20. Through it all, Victoria and Vincent remained the center around which their family orbited. They grew older together, silver threading through their hair, lines etching deeper around their eyes. But the love between them only grew stronger, tempered by time and tested by life's inevitable challenges. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a surprise party. The ranch house was filled with grandchildren now, David and his wife having produced 3 boys, Emma 2 daughters, and Rebecca already expecting her first. Michael came from Denver with tales of interesting cases, and Sarah brought her latest medical journals to share with anyone who would listen. As Victoria looked around at the gathered crowd, at the family she and Vincent had created, she felt overwhelming gratitude. This life, these people, this love, it was everything she had never dared to hope for when she had arrived in Manassas bleeding and broken. Vincent found her on the porch later, escaping the happy chaos inside. "There you are," he said, sliding an arm around her waist. "Everyone is asking for you." "I just needed a moment," Victoria said, leaning into him, "to take it all in." "Pretty amazing, is it not?" Vincent said. "What we built." "More than amazing," Victoria said. "Miraculous." She turned to face him fully. "I was thinking about that day by the creek when you asked what I feared most. And you said trusting again," Vincent finished. "I remember. You changed my life that day," Victoria said. "When you said you would wait, you gave me something I desperately needed. Time to heal without pressure, patience without strings attached. You gave me space to find my way back to trusting not just you but myself." Vincent cupped her face tenderly, his work-roughened thumbs stroking her cheeks. "You did the hard part," he said. "I just stood still." "You did so much more than that," Victoria insisted. "You showed me what real love looks like. Not the shallow, flashy thing James offered, but deep, abiding, patient love. The kind that waits, that shows up, that chooses the other person every single day." "Well, it was easy," Vincent said with that crooked smile she still loved. "You were worth waiting for. You are worth everything." They stood there in the moonlight, older now but still so much in love, and Victoria sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. For this man, this life, this second chance she had been given. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For waiting, for loving me, for giving me this." She gestured toward the house, bright with light and laughter. "All of it." Vincent kissed her, soft and sweet, and Victoria thought about how far they had come. From that scared, hurt woman in Mrs. Henderson's store to this confident matriarch surrounded by family. From the patient cowboy willing to wait forever to the patriarch of a thriving ranch and growing family. Their story was not one of love at first sight or whirlwind romance. It was better than that. It was a story of healing and patience, of trust rebuilt brick by brick, of love that grew deeper with every year. It was a story of two people who found each other at exactly the right time and built something lasting and true. As they went back inside to their family, Victoria squeezed Vincent's hand. He squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was everything: love, trust, commitment, joy. Everything she had thought lost forever and everything he had patiently waited for her to find again. The party continued late into the night, filled with stories and laughter, and the kind of warmth that only family can create. And as Victoria watched her children and grandchildren, saw the love and security in their faces, she knew that the greatest gift she and Vincent had given them was not the ranch or financial security, but the model of what real, patient, enduring love looked like. Years later, when Victoria was in her 60s and Vincent's hair had gone completely silver, they sat on that same porch and watched their great-grandchildren play in the yard. Rebecca's daughter had just married and was expecting her first child. David's sons were running the ranch now, strong men with families of their own. Emma's daughters were both teachers, carrying on their grandmother's legacy. Michael's children were scattered across Colorado, lawyers and doctors and ranchers in their own rights. Sarah, still unmarried and still practicing medicine, visited often and spoiled the great-grandchildren terribly. "We did good," Vincent said, echoing the words he had spoken so many years before. "We did better than good," Victoria replied. "We built a legacy." "I was not talking about the ranch," Vincent said. "I was talking about us, about you and me. We made it, Victoria. All those years ago when you were so afraid to trust, so sure you would never love again, we made it anyway." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "Because you waited," she said. "Because you loved me enough to give me time." "I would do it again," Vincent said. 1,000 times over." They sat there as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The valley spread out before them. The ranch they had built together, the family they had raised, the life they had created from broken pieces and patient love. Victoria thought about young women somewhere out there who had been hurt like she had been, who thought they could never trust or love again. She wished she could tell them that healing was possible, that the right person would wait, that love could be rebuilt even after betrayal shattered it. But mostly she was just grateful. Grateful for Vincent, who had seen past her walls to the woman inside. Grateful for the life they had built, the children they had raised, the love that had sustained them through everything. Grateful for second chances and patient hearts, and the quiet miracle of trust restored. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been 25, 35, 45 years ago. "I love you too," Vincent replied, his hand finding hers, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "Always have, always will." And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Victoria Turner Xavier sat beside her husband of nearly 5 decades and thought that this, right here, was happiness. Not the absence of pain or fear, but the presence of love strong enough to overcome both. Not the fantasy of perfection, but the reality of two imperfect people who had chosen each other, day after day, year after year, building something beautiful from broken pieces. The story of Victoria Turner and Vincent Xavier was not a story of perfect love. It was better than that. It was a story of real love, patient love, hard-won love that lasted. A story that began with fear and waiting and trust rebuilt stone by stone, and ended here on this porch, with two people who had traveled the whole road together and found it good. Victoria looked at Vincent, at the face she knew as well as her own, lined now with age but still the same steady, patient man who had knelt beside her chair all those years ago and tended her wounds with gentle hands. The man who had asked what she feared most, and when she said trusting again, had simply said he would wait. He had waited, and she had healed, and together they had built this life. This beautiful, messy, joyful, real life full of love and laughter and generations of family who would carry on their legacy long after they were gone. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible on that dusty day in Manassas when she stumbled into Mrs. Henderson's store, bleeding and broken and swearing never to trust again. But life, Victoria had learned, had a way of surprising you. The best things often came from the most unexpected places, from patient cowboys with storm-gray eyes and hearts big enough to wait forever. As they went inside for dinner, surrounded by the noise and warmth of their enormous family, Victoria sent up one last prayer of gratitude. For Vincent, for love, for second chances, and for the courage to trust again even when it seemed impossible. She had been blessed beyond measure, and she knew it. Their story was coming to its end, as all stories eventually do, but what an ending it was. Not tragic or sad, but full and rich and complete. They had lived well, loved deeply, and left a legacy that would outlive them both. And when their time came, they would go together, hand in hand, the way they had faced everything else in their long and beautiful life. But that was still years away. For now, there was dinner to eat and grandchildren to hug and another evening to spend beside the man who had taught her that trust could be rebuilt, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the best things in life were worth waiting for. Victoria Turner Xavier looked at her husband across the crowded dinner table, caught his eye, and smiled. He smiled back, that same quiet, steady smile that had first made her feel safe all those decades ago. And in that moment, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that every moment of fear, every hard-won piece of trust, every day of choosing love over safety had been worth it, because this was worth it. This life, this love, this man who had waited for her to be ready and then spent a lifetime proving that her trust had been well placed. This was what she had been afraid to hope for, and it had turned out to be more wonderful than any dream. The evening stretched on, full of laughter and love, and Victoria felt at peace. Her story, their story, was a good one. A story of heartbreak and healing, of fear overcome and trust rebuilt. A story of a cowboy patient enough to wait and a woman brave enough to trust again. A story with the best possible ending. A life well lived together.